UN News.
I found this. This is a story in Off Guardian, by John and Nisha Whitehead. Right? They write, U.S. government is waging psychological war on its citizens inside the deep state Psy-Op machine. Now, we've talked about Psy-Ops. We've called plenty of things Psy-Ops in the past, but I figured we should go into what that is and why we worry about them and why you should be worried about them. So, they write, from viral memes to military-grade influence operations, the government is waging a full-spectrum psychological war, not against foreign enemies, but against its own citizens. The goal? Compliance, control, and conformity. The battlefield is no longer physical, it is psychological, and the American people are the targets. From AI-manipulated narratives and National Guard psyops to loyalty scorecards for businesses, the deep state's war on truth and independent thought is no longer covert. It is coordinated, calculated, and by design. Sound familiar? So here you go. Mm-hmm. We've covered this, right? Pentagon, ways keeping Trump era change to psychological operations. So this was way back in 2021. I don't know if you remember that. We have Lloyd Austin there, right? In the final months of the Trump admin, Mark Esper quietly moved to let the military run influence campaigns, often called psyops, more quickly and with less time for input from the State Department. So the policy change, which people described as Politico, highlights tension between military leaders and diplomats about the U.S. handles gray area operations. So, which they're all in agreement. But, links to articles are always in the description if you want to go read more. They have this linked in the Off Guardian article quite a few times, I might add. But, yet, while both major parties, long in service to the deep state, have weaponized mass communication to shape public opinion, the Trump administration is elevating it to a new art form that combines meme warfare, influencer psyops, and viral digital content to control narratives and manufacture consensus. In doing so, President Trump and his influencers are capitalizing on a propaganda system long cultivated by the security industrial complex. So, here you go. Trump administration leans in on memes, AI, and MAGA messaging. Yay. Look, they put up AI tweets and stuff. Isn't that nice? It doesn't he look great in all his splendid glory? The glorious golden leader. Since January, however, the Trump admin has shifted his tone on social media to cater to its base. Many posts, several of which play off trending memes, appear to showcase aggression towards longtime political targets for Trump, such as immigrants and Democrats. The memes have included a cartoon depiction of a person who appears to be a migrant crying while being arrested, a fake dating app profile matching a recently arrested woman with ICE, and a Valentine's Day card that read, "Roses are red, violets are blue, come here illegally and we'll deport you." So this is what the White House has been putting out, right? Nowhere in the Constitution does it say we can't post banger memes, right? This is what the White House is boiled down to. But I found this important, right? Joshua Tucker, a co-director of New York University's Center for Social Media and Politics, said such posts are designed to get people's attention. Social media has drastically changed since Trump's first term, when users would mainly see posts from accounts they followed. Now, many social media platforms use an individualized algorithm for each account that Tucker said privileges things that pop and go viral. Sound familiar? We're not quite in the world where it's just like, if I just tweet, all my followers are going to see what I tweet. It's, I need to come up with something that's going to be catchy. Right?
Yes.
And we've seen that algorithm exploitation everywhere.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, we've even seen that personally. Like, I even noticed that with my tweets, the ones that tend to be more, I don't know, like, I wouldn't say basic, but just like, I feel like if they make a decent point, Tenley don't do as well. And I noticed that Twitter would even say, boost this tweet over others.
Yeah.
So, but when it's something like more, I guess you can argue more drama or potentially full of drama, that's when they're like, boost that. And you have to pay in order for more people to see it. So I've even noticed that. And I'm sure a lot of people have also noticed that on Twitter as well. Like how, especially the algorithm favors the ones that, as you said, potentially would go viral. And then the added bonus is you can pay for it in order to go even more further out than beyond your regular audience.
Right. So what we are witnessing is not just propaganda, it is psychological warfare. Psychological warfare, as defined by the Rand Corporation, involves the planned use of propaganda and other psychological operations to influence the opinions, emotions, attitudes, and behavior of opposition groups. Today, those opposition groups include the American public. For years, the government has been bombarding the citizenry with propaganda and psychological operations aimed at conditioning to be compliant, easily manipulated, and supportive of the police state growing domestic and global power, which we are seeing as we speak. The government is so confident that its Orwellian powers of manipulation that it's taking to bragging about them. For example, the U.S. Army's 4th Psychological Operations Group, okay? The branch of the military responsible for psychological warfare. You might know a few people who used to head divisions at that, but we won't get to them. Release a recruiting video that touts its efforts to pull the strings, turn everything they touch into a weapon, be everywhere, deceive, persuade, change, influence, and inspire. We're going to watch that video in a second, so hold on to that. This is the danger that lurks in plain sight. A government so immersed in the art of mind manipulation that it no longer sees its citizens as individuals but as targets. Of all the weapons in the government's vast arsenal, psychological warfare may be the most insidious. And I think it encompasses a whole ton of shit that we're going to get to. But they mentioned this video, right? This is literally propaganda recruitment. And as our, copyright disclaimer there in the bottom of the fucking description says that you are allowed to react and educate people through the videos, and that's fair use. So we're going to educate people, right? Because I think this is important to watch. So this is literally straight from the Army's 4th Division psychological operations. So if your opponent is of a choleric temper, seek to irritate him. This is what they start with. That's Sun Tzu, right? Pretend to be weak, that he may grow arrogant. Do you know what that is? This is Betty Boop, right? This is Cab Calloway specifically being animated.
As the world watches and listens in horror, the peaceful pro-democracy demonstration in China comes to a violent and bloody end.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Who's pulling the strings, Care Bear?
Wolves hiding nearby.
So I don't know where this forest is, but hello? Born from the ashes, right? They have this fun little ghost graphic, of a world at war. But that looks like just a standard subway bus. You'll find us in the shadows. At the tip of the spear. Against China,
You say
a threat rises in the east. I mean, this is just Russia invades Ukraine. Warfare is evolving. and the world's a stage.
Prayer is another very important phase of warfare. It has as its target not the body, but the mind of the enemy.
The target of psychological warfare is against the enemy's mind.
It is words and ideas.
The ammunition used by Psy-War.
Its mission is to influence the thoughts of the enemy soldiers, and at the same time
is expected and encouraged to study foreign languages and the social sciences such as history, economics, and sociology. He must have a broad and sympathetic understanding of all phases of human experience.
Gripping at my skin, the walls of night closing.
We come in many forms.
taken on new form.
We're everywhere.
To say my last.
Like, they're literally bragging about this, you know, which is just wild. Like, but yeah, I mean, this is standard propaganda video. Ghosts. We're all ghosts in the machine. Anyway, but thoughts, Care Bear? What you got?
I mean, how can I phrase this? Well, it's kind of what we talked about before in the last couple of segments, you know, with regarding what Malcolm Jamal Williams said in regards to revolution. Like, it's kind of plays into this. It's the idea of, like, I mean, we already talked about it in terms of, you know, people might feel overwhelmed, but I think the other part of it is the media and kind of, you know, kind of how it's making us think like, oh, it's everyone else is the problem and you're fine. Like, or if you think you're not okay, no, you're lying to yourself. Like, the real trouble is everybody else. It's like China is the issue, Russia is the issue, like, not us. We're actually trying to help you. So it's gaslighting you into believing that things are a lot better for you than you are. Like, you know, so I think that's also a part of that too. Just
Yeah.
the idea of how the media is manipulating you into thinking of yourself as better off when you're really not. And the reality is, truly, you know, as someone who has traveled, not to say I've traveled extensively, but I traveled a little bit to understand that we are actually, in many ways, are better off than a lot of other countries where, if in a similar situation, sorry, can't talk, what we're seeing in the global south, we talk about them being so desperate enough that because they have nothing to lose, like, they're more willing to go against the government. We're seeing that right now in Latin America and in Africa, you know, and here it's like the ground, I argue, has been ripe for that, but it's still the idea of people thinking, oh, you know, those people over there, you know, like, something's wrong with them, or like they have less than us, and so, you know, and even if we think that we're the poorest of the poor, you know, we look at people in other countries and are like, oh no, we're better than. But we're kind of complacency and our filth, so to speak,
Yeah.
while we kind of mock others for being in theirs. But we're gaslit, essentially, to kind of think that the way we do that we're actually better off than we actually are.
Well, as button, do the thing. As the military journal Task and Purpose explains, Psychological warfare is all about influencing governments, people of power, everyday citizens. PsyOps soldiers aim to influence emotions, notices, reasoning, and behavior of foreign governments and citizens and deliberately deceive enemy forces. Yet, increasingly, these operations are being used not just abroad, but at home. The government has made clear in a word and deed that we the people are domestic enemies to be targeted, tracked, manipulated, micromanaged, surveilled, viewed as suspects, and treated as if our fundamental rights are mere privileges that can be easily discarded. Aided by technological advances in behavioral science, the U.S. government has become a master manipulator of minds, perception, and belief, and agitator of the masses. As J. Edgar Hoover once observed, it is the function of mass agitation to exploit all the grievances, hopes, aspirations, prejudices, fears, and ideals of all the special groups that make up our society, social, religious, economic, racial, political, stir them up, set one against the other, divide and conquer. That's the way to soften up democracy. Well, here are a few ways psychological warfare is being waged against the American people right now. So, weaponizing violence. This, I feel, is very important, recently, right? Reoccurring mass shootings, domestic unrest, and acts of terrorism traumatize the public, destabilize communities, and give the government greater pretext to crack down, lock down, and clamp down, all in the name of national security, right? We saw recently this recent gunsman with, burn Israel and Cyrillic characters in English written on things, and they're definitely trying to, characterize this person very specifically, as they have done with plenty of other, shooters that I'm sure was on some watch list, right? Already, but still ended up shooting a bunch of people, right? Which this is part of it, right? Weaponizing surveillance and pre-crime, digital surveillance, AI threat detection, and predictive policing have created a society in which everyone is watched, profiled, and potentially punished before any crime occurs. The government's war on crime has also veered into the realm of social media and technological entrapment, with government agencies adopting fake social media identities and AI-created profile pictures, which we've covered before, in order to surveil, target, and capture potential suspects. It has all the markings of a digital panopticon optimized for psychological control. So, digital tools and censorship, right? Censorship is just the beginning. Tech giants working with the government now determine who can speak, bank, travel, or participate in society. Digital currencies, which can be used as a tool for government surveillance of citizens and control over their financial transactions, which, we're getting into all those stable coins and bitcoins and a lot of these things, right? Combined with social credit systems and surveillance, capitalism create a litmus test to determine who is worthy enough to be part of the society and punish individuals for moral lapses and social transgressions, and reward them for adhering to government-sanctioned behavior. For example, the Trump White House recently rolled out a pilot program using a loyalty scorecard to evaluate businesses. Echoing China's social credit system, businesses deemed non-compliant with patriotic messaging or flagged for ideological extremism based on their social media posts, public statements, or advertising content are at risk of being barred from federal contracts, which he's been doing to universities too, right? So, yeah. Weaponizing compliance, from the war on terror to the vid mandates, nearly every government crisis response has been weaponized to normalize surveillance and control and demand obedience in exchange for perceived safety. I mean, we saw that all with the war on terror. So, you still have to take your shoes off at the airport, right? Entertainment? No, you don't? You don't have to do that now? When did that change? I feel like that was recent.
A couple months ago. That was a couple months ago.
So,
but
Hollywood...
I
go ahead.
Back, so I don't have to do that anyway. So,
right. Hollywood and the Pentagon have a long symbiotic relationship. The military provides equipment, personnel, and funding in exchange for favorable portrayals of war, surveillance, and state power. As Elmer Davis, a CBS broadcaster who was appointed the head of the Office of War Information, observed, the easiest way to inject a propaganda idea into most people's minds is to let it go through the medium of an entertainment picture, when they do not realize that they are being propagandized, which that's all over the place. The government's nudge units use psychology and data science to steer public behavior. It may begin with paperwork, but it ends with worldview manipulation, conditioning the population to think and act as the state prefers, all while maintaining the illusion of free will. That's like tax incentives and like certain rewards, like, you know, you got a certain amount of money for like getting vaxxed, things like that. You know, that's what those nudge units are supposedly for, right? How can we reward them to do what we want, pretty much? How we would nudge them the right direction. Talking about weaponizing desensitization, lockdown, SWAT raids, threat alerts, right? It's authoritarianism is a new normal. Get used to it. That's pretty much what this is, right? What's once shocked is now routine. That's by design. The more accustomed we become to surveillance, policing, and crisis, the more willing we embrace it. So that's what you're seeing right now, I think, with this National Guard, right? You know, very similar stuff happening with that. This is the one I was talking about earlier, right? So weaponizing genetics, right? Which you're like, what do they mean by that? Well, fear doesn't just condition us, it can alter us. Trauma and fear responses can be encoded in DNA and passed on to future generations. Yep. This is Gabor-Mate has talked about this with a lot of, like, you know, the neurodivergent stuff, that's generational ingrained trauma, right? You have
that's where
this study,
the idea of generational trauma comes from. So
right. So this is a study finds that fear can travel quickly through generations of mice, right? So let me read you this study because it's interesting. A newborn mouse pup, seemingly innocent to the workings of the world, may actually harbor generations worth of information passed down by its ancestors. In the experiment, researchers taught male mice to fear the smell of cherry blossoms by associating the scent with mild food shocks. 2 weeks later, they bred with females. The resulting pups were raised to adulthood, having never been exposed to the smell. Right? So, yet, when the critters caught a whiff of it for the first time, they suddenly became anxious and fearful. They were even born with more cherry blossom detecting neurons in their noses and more brain space devoted to cherry blossom smelling. Right? Like, that's how much this trauma affects things, you know? So the memory transmission extended out another generation when these male mice bred and similar results were found, right? So this is 2 generations of mice, at least. Neuroscientists at Emory University found that genetic markers thought to be wiped clean before birth were used to transmit a single traumatic experience across generations, leaving behind traces in the behavior and anatomy of future pups. So, like, all the trauma your people have experienced, for sure, I'm sure has genetically been passed down, you know, as well as everyone else's just standard rat race trauma, you know. Right. So, but yeah. Now, this was another interesting bit that I should have touched on earlier, right? But the Pentagon's chilling megacities training video predicts that by 2030, armed forces would be used against civilian populations to solve domestic, political, and social problems. Under Trump's expanded domestic security powers, the National Guard has been increasingly deployed in civil contexts, most recently to address squalor and crime and other parts of the country. So, which is, it's definitely not about squalor and crime, right? But I watched this video they're talking about, and it was, they're talking about how the urban centers, right, these megacities, right, places like, I don't know, DC, Chicago, New York, LA, right? Like how many places that Trump recently talked about, right? Like these, you know, metropolises that they are like they are the powder keg. You know, you have all these people and few resources in a small area, you know, that is difficult to like combat in, by the way. That's what they're worried about. Like we've seen Fallujah and Iraq, and like we know urban centers are not easy to like squash problems in, you know? So they're worried about places like DC and Chicago and these urban environments. If these people decide to riot or they decide to like revolt, it's not going to be that easy to get them out of there, you know? So, right. But yeah, I mean, that's partially what this was talking about, was like, that's where the future of warfare is going, because it's always going to be urban, you know? But none of this is speculative. It's well documented. In 2022, the Pentagon was forced to investigate reports that the military was creating fake social media profiles with AI-generated photos and fictitious news sites to manipulate users, which we've seen a ton. These are the modern tools of psychological warfare, but the blueprint goes back decades. The end goal of this mind control campaign, packaged in the guise of greater good, is to see how far the American people will allow the government to go in reshaping the country in the image of a totalitarian police state, which I would argue it is one. Like, it just is one. It is an authoritative, autocratic, despotic regime with, you know, some democracy painted on it, right? Like, it's the global world superpower, you know? You don't get that without having that. In the 50s, the CIA's MK Ultra program tested LSD, electroshock, hypnosis, and other behavior modification techniques on civilians and soldiers. And guess which civilians, by the way? Like, poor and working class, which guess what predominantly is poor and working class? We've covered this before. So, American citizens often, without their knowledge or consent, CIA agents hired prostitutes to lure men into bugged rooms, then dose them with drugs and observe their behavior. Some detainees were interrogated to death in efforts to erase memories or induce compliance. It wasn't until the 70s that a portion of the CIA's criminal activities under MK Ultra came to light. Congress's Church Committee investigations revealed that the CIA had spent over $20 million attempting to control human thought and behavior, reportedly as a means of programming people to carry out assassinations, Manchurian candidates, literally, right? Similarly, the top secret Montauk project allegedly was working to develop mind control techniques that could trigger crime waves. They are not fringe experiments, they were official policy. As journalist Lorraine Boissonnaud noted, the same methods that had once been used to train American soldiers ended up being used to extract information from terrorists in Abu Ghraib, Iraq, and Guantanamo Bay. Right? So all of this is connected, and they also learned from Israel, who were doing the same thing. Fast forward to the present day, it's clear the government's PsyOps warfare has not ended, it has simply gone digital. Today's PsyOps rely on mass media, AI, algorithmic censorship, and behavioral economics, not LSD, but the goal remains the same: shape thought, induce obedience, and silence dissent. In 2014, for example, a fusion center in Washington state mistakenly released records detailing government interest in psychoelectronic weapons, remote mind control tactics allegedly capable of controlling people or subjecting them to various degrees of pain from a distance. Okay? And like, you see how that's a little link there? You can go in the description, go to the article, click the link. It's an interesting read as well. But more recently, the vid gave government a global platform to deploy fear-based compliance strategies. Science writer David Robson explains, fear of contagion led us to become more conformist and tribalistic. We value conformity and obedience over eccentricity or rebellion. That is precisely the point. By constantly invoking crisis, the government keeps us reactive, not rational. Fear shuts down the brain's prefrontal cortex, our center for reasoning and critical thought. A population that stops thinking for itself is one easily led. This is how the government persuades people to surveil themselves, police their neighbors, and conform to shifting norms through fear, repetition, and psychological fatigue. It's classic Orwell. Through censorship, disinformation, crackdowns, and hate crime laws, speech becomes thought crime, and conformity becomes patriotism. Edward Bernays, the father of modern propaganda, warned of this nearly a century ago. We are governed, our minds are molded, our taste formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. They are, he concluded, the true ruling power of our country. This invisible government, the deep state, has perfected the art of psychological control. With the approach of the 2026 midterm elections, this psychological warfare will only escalate. More fear-based narratives, more digital manipulation, and more pressure to conform. We've also learned that deep state isn't so deep. Like a lot of them, they focus on the intelligence and the intelligentsia, but it tends to be the capital holders even above them, So at least in our observations. Right. But, and those people aren't so invisible. They're out in the open, right on their yachts. So anyway, closing thoughts. You got anything?
Clip here.
Oh, the we're fucked. Sure. I have that somewhere. But yeah, which I don't think we are necessarily. I am still hopeful to some degree, but
you're more of an optimist. In some ways, I think I'm more of a cynic than you. Which
I just feel like America is full of fuck around and find out individuals, and push comes to shove, shit's gonna move, But until then, I don't know. But
we're fucked.
Thank you.
Anyway, talking about these things is certainly why we're demonetized. So you can scan that QR code on your screen or go to ko-fi.com/Indie News Network if you would like to give us some monetary assistance. But if not, subscribe, hit the share button. That I cannot tell you how much that's needed. Sharing these videos with like-minded individuals is how we grow. Leave a comment. Let us know what you think. Are we on the right track here?
Even if they're not like-minded, send it to them to piss them off.
Yeah, exactly. But otherwise, thanks for watching.